So if you go out driving looking for something cool, make sure you drive something cool. Make the car you park in the driveway at least as interesting as the one you're inquiring about. My '39 Ford Woody and until recently my '67 Ford Country Squire have become those vehicles. I call them my icebreakers, my welcome wagons. When the old guy looks out to his driveway and sees my car, the response usually is, "Let me get my shoes on, I'll be right out." That's because he wants to see my car as badly as I want to see his. You show me yours, I'll show you mine. Suddenly, we're on equal turf. He understands that I'm not a poser or someone who just might want to pick up his car cheap and flip it for big profit. Harold Osmer, Automotive Book Reviews. Secrets of the Barn Find Hunter by Tom Cotter. Now, I'd never heard of Tom Cotter until I got this book. And it's last year's book. It's a 2022. So, okay, that's year before last year's book. But just the same, it's terrific. Cotter has been on the Hagerty YouTube channel, and he goes out, he finds all these old cars and whatnot. He's a bit of a automotive archaeologist, let's call him. And in this book, he's written several, he tells some decent strategies for anybody who wants to go out and find an old car and fix it up or turn it around and sell it or whatever you want to do. If you have the time, some pretty good strategies in here in this book. Now, I found it interesting on a couple of different levels because he's not afraid to tell you that a lot of the old car industry has come and gone. It's also come and gone a couple of times, different cycles. He even explains that there was a book written back in the 1950s about how to find an old car. In the 1950s, which means most of those cars were from the teens and the 30s, which means this kind of thing's been going on all the time. And we hear those stories. We see them on Hagerty and other places where you find the car in the barn and whatever else. Well, Cotter breaks out some strategies for you and explains a couple of them. One of which was in our intro there. He says if you show up in your $80,000 SUV and want to ask about that old Bronco in the back, he said, chances are the guy's going to look and say, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you show up with something cool, show that you're one of the guys, all of a sudden, you can break down those barriers. As much as anything, you're looking for friendships and you're trying to develop a relationship with the people. Another point he makes is that instead of following up with just a phone call or an email, which are easily forgotten, write a letter to the guy. Those things will have a little more impact and a little more lasting. If the guy opens it up, he has to read it. You almost have to read a letter, especially something handwritten, right, legibly. Something that came up in here that I found fascinating. I'm not involved in finding old cars and fixing them up. I'm just not that guy. Said, but I am involved. I do have a couple old cars out in the garage here. He mentions two guys that I know reasonably well. One of them is Jay Leno. Well, I'm a Southern California guy. I've been here 30 years, been involved in this since then. Anybody who's a car guy or even related to car guy stuff says, yeah, I know Jay Leno. Well, I was on one of his early podcast things and he helped me with my book when I first came, all this stuff. So he shows up in here and he just, of course, if Leno shows up at your door and says, hey, how much do you want for that? It's pretty much easy for a guy like that. Second guy that he mentioned is a Ferrari dude named Tom Shaughnessy. Now, I hadn't heard that name in a while. And I know Tom from when I first came to Los Angeles over 35 years ago. I had an apartment. We worked together at the same place. He needed a place to stay. So Tom was my first roommate in the way back days. And I knew he was a Ferrari guy doing his thing. He had a little Dino that I wasn't all that impressed with, but apparently somebody was. Made some decent money off it. Anyway, so what comes across in this book, it was easy for me to read. I could totally relate to it, even though I'm not going to go out and search for these cars. Tom expresses a lot of background, like I say, the archaeology part of finding the old cars. talking to the guys, develop a relationship with the individual. He said, even if you see a car that you like in the back there, go ask him if he needs some parts. You know, start out with that rather than say, hey, you're going to sell that old Mustang back there? No, show up and say, hey, you've been looking for parts for that thing? I know a guy. You know, of course, you better know a guy because otherwise, who knows? And what happens is the relationships evolve, and I'm sure you've all encountered this. As soon as you start working on something and the network starts to work, hey, wait, I know a guy who has parts, or somebody I heard, or this guy's got, and then off you go. And those parts that you'd have never found are suddenly, you know, that stack of stuff in the guy's garage. Maybe not a whole car, but you don't need a whole car. You already got the car. And so that's it. Tom says, be nice to the people. You don't have to be their friends, but you should be friendly with them. You should follow up on your things. You should be very thorough in what you're looking for. You should also know what you're looking for. He outlined some decent strategies here. It's in storyteller fashion. So he goes through, not a year by year kind of thing, but he does offer up some things. Here's one section that says, farmers never sell. Now, that's just one aspect of farmers, and not all of them are going to be that way, but that's just kind of how it is. You need to know what you're looking at, so you have to do your research and your due diligence when you come around it. This is a terrific book for that sort of thing. I found it very entertaining. I really dug it. Tom has been around, like I say, I didn't really know of the guy, but he's been around a long time. He was head of public relations over at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Of course, I live in Los Angeles, so how would I know that? He's been involved with NASCAR, IndyCar, drag racing, road racing, Tommy Ivo, Dean Jeffries, did a series of barn find books, as I mentioned earlier. He's done a lot of different things. He's a renowned barn find hunter. Here it is, Secrets of the Barn Find Hunter by Tom Cotter. Get yourself a copy of this sucker. Have yourself a good time. It's a terrific read, even if you're not looking for that 1972 Bronco. It's Harold Osmer, Automotive Book Reviews.